final presentation for the day. So Kaarina Kailo, former professor of women's studies, Kaarina Kailo, före detta professor i kvinnoforskning, kommer att prata om en feministisk syn på fred och hållbar utveckling, fred på jorden och fred med jorden. We will hear a feminist view of peace and sustainable development, peace on earth and peace with earth. And I will try and put your presentation.
Thank you for organizing this event. And just a little addition. I was an ecofeminist in the 1980s, and it was definitely a recipe for joblessness. And now it's quite acceptable. So I'm very happy that in 20 years things have changed. I brought with me some of my books. All of them have to do with peace and ecofeminism and sustainable development. So if you want to look at them, they are in English and Finnish.
Could I only see Andreu? Could you confirm? Can you see the slides? Good, thank you.
Okay, so it says I'm an ex-professor of women's studies, and since my job was frozen because I was considered quite dangerous, I became a politician. I'm now in the Oulu Council, Oulu Region Council, and I also became an artist and a writer. So no problem, I could sing my own songs. I didn't have to train women to enter the natural sciences and mathematics. I could focus on issues that were close to my heart. So my aim in this presentation is to introduce a little bit my own peace building work and network. And when I say our visions, I'm referring to the networks with which I've been busy for about 20 years. And to Andrea and Paul, I would like to say that everything you listed as the elements of the transformed society with care and love and whatever you listed, there's a name for that. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. It's called the gift economy. And that's what it's not a utopia, because you find that in matriarchal societies, even today, but this is again part of the censored knowledge. And my network is very much interested in bringing up and showing that this peaceful world is not a utopia. It exists, but it's censored. So in our networks, we learn mostly from indigenous peace pioneers, as they call themselves, well, some of them, and from other matriarchal peoples, to which I will be referring. My motto for this talk is that motherhood, and by this I mean cultural motherhood, not biological motherhood, is not a secondary, but the most central question of our civilization. And Maria Gimbutas, whose work has had a huge impact on the modern matriarchal studies and peace movement in that alignment, has said, we must refocus our collective memory. The necessity for this has never been greater as we discover that the path of progress is extinguishing the very conditions for life on Earth. And that was in 1991. This picture does not send a message that this person depicted is the only tyrant, dictator, and so on. But with many leaders of many nations, they represent the epitome of patriarchy. And that's a word we didn't hear too much, but I think if we want a real honest analysis of what's wrong with the world, we have to use that term, because patriarchy is a very historically recent development. It's only 5,000 years old. So the recovery of the feminine and of cultural maternal imaginary is the peace work that my network is interested in. And we think we have to recover the original instructions that were in most pre-Christian, pre-patriarchal cultures, so that we don't change the world only through politics, but we have to change the symbols, the language, the mythology. The Matryoshka doll has been appropriated, even though it's clear that it's a maternal symbol, but this epitomizes how the matriarchal world has been taken over and changed to its opposite. Our network was visiting Florence at one point, and we were horrified to see these kinds of statues everywhere. But they didn't seem to bother the local inhabitants. I said, you've got pictures everywhere of women being murdered and beheaded, and they are mythological women, but people are so blind to what's closest to them. And I think that what our blindness is this fact that even in Ukraine, there was 3,000 years of prosperity and peace, and nobody talks about that, particularly in our school system. A year before all of this started, this war thing, we met with my network in Berlin, and it was a conference called Faster, Bigger, Richer. Why growth at any price needs an alternative. And it was at the same time the celebration of the 80th birthday of Heidi Abendroth, who is the pioneer of modern matriarchal studies, and who has been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, which she never gets because she's not a head of a state. She's not, a man or the odd woman who gets it. And she has been working for peace for 30 years, locating, identifying all the peaceful cultures. So as a result of the incentives and strengths experienced at this conference, we decided to give our vision a more tangible shape. And it was then taken up by my initiative by other women, and it became then a Matri Future Declaration. And this is just a few sentences from our declaration. The international movement for a balanced, re-mothered future. For millennia, indigenous matriarchal societies of peace all over the world have been showing us how an egalitarian, caring society is entirely possible, with practical ways of being that work for everyone, not a utopia. By placing the principle of mothering, symbolic, cultural, at their heart, and trusting in the mother-given world, matricentric social order is recreated day by day. So from all over the world, we need to learn from these indigenous societies how to remother and rematriate our own social order as we strive for a peaceful world in balance. So the networks that are connected through this declaration, the main network is the International Network of Feminists for a Gift Economy. It's a network of activist scholars who are seeking solutions to the world's many crises caused by climate change, patriarchy, and the fallacy of unrestrained economic growth on a planet of dwindling resources. Indigenous women are at the forefront of wisdom traditions that we women from elsewhere are reintroducing with the brothers who are also, as we are, bad subjects of patriarchy. And we are connected with Women in Black, Code Pink, and related networks like the Matriarchal Studies list. And we have created a vision for a Matri future where the gift, love, and care is not a private choice or a private responsibility delegated to women, but a collective public precondition of justice as love made public. So, and we also feel that we have to change the norm of the human, which today is homo economicus, the idea of the economic man out to make more money and to be successful. And we have to change it for homo donans, the giving human who is found in Sumatra among the Minangkabau, where the men are also interested in being called mothers, because it's the best thing you can be, and people appreciate the connection with mothering. You will get all the web pages, I think, when you get the copy of this, so I'll skip that. And here is another conference that was very important in St. Gallen in Switzerland. Time is right, Congress on Matriarchal Studies. It's important because the first matriarchal archive was created, and it's full of books that prove that peace and egalitarian societies are possible. And Oxford has created a bibliography of matriarchal studies. So this is really not flim-flam or some feminist fantasy. It's a reality, and I urge you to look into it. And we also founded the Planetary Movement for Mother Earth, which is run by Claudia von Berlhoff. And this is at the event in Germany. I think it was in 2013. So what is a gift? The gift economy is intimately connected with the principle of sustainability and an inbuilt ecological ethics. We need to reclaim a sensuous, participatory, interspecies conversation where we recognize our position on the continuum of life forms and posit other radical imaginaries, social arrangements, and methodologies that allow us to conceive of difference itself differently. Economists recognize the relations of interdependence between what the native people call human and non-human persons. They refer to animals as persons because they have just as much respect, and they see that the animals are just as important as humans. So that is reflected in their language. So here is the difference between gift and exchange. In other words, the prototypical native approach to social arrangements, and exchange as the core of capitalism. In native societies, the key is creation of abundance and surplus. And surplus is also given to neighbors to prevent war. In contrast, in exchange, there is a creation of artificial scarcity. Knowledge is being fenced, and the commons are a fence to create demand. And this is what has happened also to universities. Sharing economy contrasts with this. Whereas in the native system, gift giving is a turn-taking circular economy. It means that A gives to B and B gives to C, and not A and B exchanging and being in debt to each other. So the idea is that when everybody carries another human being or an animal, then the whole society thrives. So there is no absolute necessity for reciprocity. And the idea of there is no free lunch does not work, because women give free lunches to their children all the time. And that's the economy we need. So the relations are balanced with and between human and non-human persons. Whereas in patriarchy, women and nature are currency of exchange between alpha males. Obviously not all males, but those who grab the power and manage to stay on top. And exchange is ego-centered and competitive, and it's based often on false advertisement and lies. And one thing I've learned from the native people is they are horrified how much the patriarchal societies and Western societies are based on lying. So whether it's Russia or the Western countries, business, everything is done based on false promises and lying. What I think is now obvious is how dysfunctional and eco-socially unsustainable patriarchy is. So if you think about it, killing babies through abortion is a highly moral issue right now, with laws trying to be, with the US, for instance, trying to change the laws to remove control from women regarding their own bodies. At the same time, sacrificing young boys on the battlefield and sacrificing civilians in cities, it's naturalized by Russians, by the US, and so on. So why is abortion such a big thing if killing is so normal for patriarchy? That's always one. Well, I guess they need them as future soldiers to be sacrificed. But of course, we feel for men as much as for women. Men must sacrifice in the name of nation and heroism. That's what they're conditioned with. Women must sacrifice in the name of the family, the private world. And I was curious, I was very intrigued when I read recently that in 1944, the Finnish journal Kotiliesi wrote, "Women, don't be sad when your sons die on the battlefield. The sacrifice of your sons fertilizes the soil with their blood and creates new heroes." That was in Kaleva a few days ago. And Mary Condon was an incredible expert on peace issues. She has studied the differences between this matriarchal or matricultural Celtic Ireland and what happened when patriarchy took over. And she said that women used to give the gift of blood to Mother Earth, and they would bleed in menstruation huts and so on. And so then men copied this bleeding, but they made it into violence and they made it into real sacrifice, whereas for women, it was a gift to Mother Earth. Okay. So here is like in visual extreme form. Of course, these are all caricatures. I realize that, but to make a point, I have to exaggerate. Why in our schools don't we learn about the Iroquoian Great Law of Peace? And the patriarchal regime is what we naturalize. The Iroquoian matriarchy was the model that we should learn, and not this argument that democracy was invented in Athens. That's not true at all. I mean, the United States Confederation is built on the confederation of the native people in North America, minus women, because women were in power. The Elderly Women's Council decided about peace and war. Now you might say that's not equal. Why didn't the men decide about war and peace? Well, their thinking is that the most powerful and brave and I mean, testosterone filled and strong, they should not be given most power because they are likely to abuse it. So the weakest have to have most power. So it was a kind of inequality based on what prevents war and what guarantees peace. And there have been long periods of peace among the Iroquois. Of course, there's been wars as well, and they've lost much of their culture. But I was in Canada for 17 years, and I was there and participated in the demonstrations and everything when the local Montreal French people wanted to extend a golf course across the sacred lands and graveyards of the Mohawk people. The women said, now is the time to go to war. You don't do this to our ancestors. And they took over the bridge leading to Montreal, and people couldn't get to work. And this crisis lasted 3 months, and only one person died. They won. The public opinion was definitely on their side. But I saw from close by that women were the decision makers. But in the newspapers in Canada, they only showed the faces of the warriors and gave the impression that the warriors were the real decision makers. So what are the matriarchies? There's a lot of resistance to the word matriarchy, and in Finland, it's, I think, even today, a no-no word, because people don't know what it is. It is considered to be the reversal of patriarchy, with women ruling over men, but that's not true at all. Matriarchies are mother-centered societies. They are based on maternal values, caretaking, nurturing, motherliness, and this holds for everyone. There's no division of men and economics and technology, and women and babies and the private life. They don't have those distinctions. Matriarchal societies are consciously built upon these maternal values and motherly work, and this is why they are much more realistic than patriarchies. They are, on principle, need-oriented. Their precepts aim to meet everyone's needs with the greatest benefit. So in matriarchies, mothering, which originates as a biological fact in the case of women, is transformed into a cultural model. And this is what most people find it very hard to understand. In Finland, many feminists say, oh, it's essentialism. It's not essentialism, it's the cultural system which is built on everybody's need to act like a mother in that logic. But they have also had wars. Their gender scripts are very different from those of Europe, for instance. Women could be warriors, women could be leaders. They had all the positions available. And it was not the sex that mattered, but the role was gendered, not the person. So a judge was considered female, and a soldier was considered male, even regardless of what the sex of the person was. And one of the books that I'm circulating here is an example of a work in my network. I edited with Erela Sharmi a book called Mothering, Gift and Revolution, which was to honor the work of Genevieve Vaughan on the gift economy. And it has writings by members of our network, including Vandana Shiva and many ecofeminists. If you're interested in learning more about these issues, you can buy it as an ebook on Vanda Edizione. It's only 8 euros to buy it. So regarding the environmental collapse, poverty, disease, nuclear weapons, conventional war, lies, oligarchy, it is, of course, important to use every possible means necessary to find the source of the problems and to create a road map to solve them. And I remind you that the change must affect politics, representations, myths, assumptions about human nature, rituals, and culture. That's why I have written books about the sauna. And somebody, I forget now who was talking about the importance of healing. Was it Andrea? Yeah, so we have the same view. The native people have been taking sweat lodges, world renewal seminars and workshops to heal from colonialism and to get out of their violence. There's a lot of violence in native communities resulting from their trauma. So they start with sweat lodge healing. Even in the prisons, they have the sweat lodge. And in Finland, we have the peace institution, sauna, but we don't see it as a peace institution. And I have been looking for its maternal roots and found that it's also a healing institution, but we don't see it that way anymore. So I think that we could do a lot more with the sauna as an alternative site for non-consumerist togetherness, rituals, and so on. Then I have written also about Finnish goddesses and revised the patriarchal missionary writings because they are written from a patriarchal point of view and don't do justice to what I have found out about the northern matriculture. And here I wanted to show a picture I took in Lithuania a couple of months ago. I went to Maria Gimbutes's exhibition in Vilna on warriors and goddesses. And there we learned about the 3,000 years of peace in old Europe, which is practically Ukraine. The wheat treasure place of Europe. And they had women's councils, and well, I won't go into it, but when we are thinking of new ministries or whatever strategies we suggest, I suggest that we copy the Iroquoian system where they had women's councils and men's councils, and each council had to listen to the other one, and men could not do decisions alone. They had to listen to women, and it's built into the structures. And they also have this system of matriarchal longhouses where women would stay with their mothers, so they didn't experience any of the vulnerability of nuclear family, because the sisters brought up the kids together. But when they started moving to the patrilineal patriarchal system, they were taken away from their communities, and they were very vulnerable to the violence of the in-laws, and they were isolated from their mothers and uncles. So I think that's a thing to think about as well. What happens when the shift happened from matriarchy to patriarchy in terms of nuclear family? Because I think nuclear family is capitalism in the microscopic way. It's the same kind of system of exploitation of women's emotional and nurturing labor that you find in the nursing field, in the business life, and in society. You don't want to pay the nurses, you don't want to pay the mothers, but all the money goes into arms, into militarism. So that's why motherhood is not a side issue, it is a key issue. And just one more example, I think I'm probably over my time limit, even though I appreciate very much you stayed here, because I traveled 2 days to give 15 minutes. So it's nice somebody stayed here. The Mi'kmaq had a matriarchal society. The woman's voice was heard very clearly when important decisions were being made. When decisions that affect the future of the people are being made, the ones who gave birth to those people should have the controlling input to the decision. For example, if war was being considered, the woman's point of view would not only take into account the reasons that war seemed to be required, it would also take into account the cost in human lives and suffering that would follow. For this reason, a woman's viewpoint provides a balance that a man is not equipped to provide. While the major leaders of the Mi'kmaq were males, they always listened carefully and respectfully to the voices of the female elders. And I already talked about the Oka crisis. So here is the final summary of my points. Gifting is now in our society a private choice. It's not part of the overall ethics, and profits over people and the truth has taken over the gift giving. I think it's true that the housework and care work is a surplus given to the capitalist. And but business culture is in the same way non-sustainable. The raping of women in war has its parallel in how women's history is being demonized. Women's culture and the women-dominated fields of healthcare, elderly care, education are in the same way subjected to the male-dominated fields. So all of this has to change if we want peace. In the old system, The tree of life was the center of the social organization as a symbol that we are all branches of the same tree. And the northern great mother, the golden woman, was represented as a woman who was a tree of life and who had different animals at the roots and on top. So the idea of the human was not separated from nature, but the connecting symbol was where humans and non-humans were connected. And it also included generations and genders. So a very different image from the monotheistic God that stands alone. And I think that we now have women thinking like men because of the manufacturing of consent and socialization. So women give gifts to patriarchy because they are assimilated to the notion of exchange and patriarchy. And they don't realize that this is a free gift to the profit seekers who don't admit that this is how it should be seen from a Marxist perspective. Am I way over my time?
You are a little bit over time, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to remind you that yes, there are peaceful societies, although they are being turned into tourist sites. They are trying to now incorporate them into the market economy by making them exotic sites to visit. Such people are the Mosuo in China, the Khasi in India, the Iroquois in the US and Canada, the Khoisan, the Minangkabau, and so on.